Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today I'm going to introduce you to Chip Hazard, who's the co founder and general partner at Flybridge, an early stage venture capital firm focused on AI startups with investments like MongoDB and Codecademy. Chip's investment interests include companies building data infrastructure, developer platforms for AI application builders and operators, and AI infused complex systems. Before co founding Flybridge in 2002, Chip was a general partner at Greylock, a leading VC firm he joined in 1994. Thanks for coming on the show, Chip.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really nice to meet both of you.
First of all, Chip Hazard has to be the coolest name, by the way, right? That
I,
has
I
really,
am I am the only venture capitalist with my own action figure.
really, because that's a badass name, right?
Yeah,
That sounds like you're a cowboy from like the old Western times. I love it.
so if
So,
you Google Chip Hazard, you will find my action figure, which was a
are you
character
serious?
in the movie Small Soldiers. Yes,
Really? How'd you do that? Like where does that come from?
voiced by Tommy Lee Jones. I have no idea how that happened.
Dude, no way. Wait,
Yeah.
that's huge. So like Tommy Lee Jones voiced, like, wait a minute, my head's exploding. How did that happen?
So I think the way that happened is when I was in college, I was
Yeah.
a ski racer, and I was in a ski race in Mammoth, and I finished, and they call out your name and time, and this person, Mammoth, generally being frequented by people from Southern California, came up to me and said, "Chip Hazard, that's an amazing name. I need to write that into a script." And so I'm pretty sure that was a script writer, although they would never admit it. All characters are fictional, of course, but I think that might be the history of how I ended up in a movie.
All right, so I wasn't that off base by saying it's a really cool name, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
can I just jump ahead a little bit because over the last 6 7 months, I'm sure you're familiar. You had all these Y Combinator, companies going out there. These young people, basically young, mostly men, but some women as well, who are two people, maybe an engineer, someone else, what have you. Really cool idea. From that, how in the world can you figure out like what are the companies that could be the next, big unicorn? It seems so impossible to figure it out. Like, what's the secret to this, Chip?
Yeah,
How,
no,
how does this work?
I'm not sure there's a huge secret, but when we think about investing, there's somewhat easy to describe, hard to do
Mhm.
things we're thinking about. And so we think a lot about the founding team, which I'll come back to. We think a lot about the market opportunity that the companies are going after. Obviously, the bigger the market opportunity, or a point of view that a smaller market can become a very big market, is critical. We spend a lot of time thinking about the why now, and so what is it about the world and today that this company needs to exist and can exist, and it couldn't exist 2 or 3 years ago, and 2 or 3 years from now will be too late. And so getting that timing right is critically important. And then obviously we think a lot about the product and the depth of IP and how that drives value for customers, whether that be B2B or B2C customers, and so the unique sort of value proposition. But because of the stage at which we invest, there's no data. These are three people and an idea, and we spend a lot of time thinking about the characteristics of the founders that we're looking to back, and part of it's resume. And so, given we invest in the AI world, depth of technical expertise is extremely important. These are not easy systems to build. The underlying infrastructure is still relatively immature in this new AI era, and so you need a really talented technical founder who can navigate their ways through a very dynamic and shifting landscape technically. So we like to see that, but you like to see that founder joined with someone who has sort of the unique insight, the domain insight, the understanding of the problem, the passion for that problem and wanting to solve that problem. And so the combination of technical expertise and domain expertise and sort of earned secrets that they've developed by studying and understanding a market are really important. And a lot of that comes through on resumes, but a lot of it doesn't. And so, well, a lot of things we're looking for in founders are sort of non-resume items, if you will. So first and foremost is that passion. The starting a company is exquisitely hard. And so as a founder, you can't be entering into it lightly. You need to really have just this deep rooted sense that you are the only person in the world that can solve this problem, that you want to go after that. And that drive that comes from that passion is what gives you the energy to sort of get through the inevitable ups and downs that you have as a founder. So passion's extremely important to us. That translates into an ability and a willingness to work hard. If you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. And so there is a lot of time and energy that goes into starting a company, and you need to be willing to put in that time and energy. And that comes again from a deep-seated belief that you're the best person in the world to try to solve this problem. We try to spend a lot of time with our founders and understanding their backstories and their backgrounds and obstacles they've overcome. And largely that's evidence of sort of grit and resilience. And so the ability to, get told no 100 times and stand up and go at it the 101st time. And so that, having seen that in someone's background, something like 70% of the founders I've backed have come from sort of non-traditional backgrounds, sort of underrepresented or immigrant backgrounds. And oftentimes that can be one signal that someone has a high degree of grit and resilience. And so you're looking for that in the founding teams. And then lastly, we spend a lot of time thinking about people who have an ability to do two things. One was be what we term internally sort of a Pied Piper. They just have a unique ability to get other people excited about what they're building. And that helps them with recruiting, that helps them with fundraising, that helps them with their early customers. And so that sort of, the exuberance that, again, oftentimes has at the core, the passion for the idea is critically important. And then lastly, you'll oftentimes hear founders reflecting on their journey, and they'll say something like, "Oh, I got lucky. I met so-and-so and my company was sort of struggling, and then suddenly I got lucky." And it turns out luck is not an arbitrary thing. Luck doesn't come down from the sky. Luck comes from an open-mindedness to meeting new people, an open-mindedness to new ideas, an ability to connect with other people. And it's through that open-mindedness and those connections that oftentimes opportunities surface for founders, and they are able to a certain extent sort of create their own luck. And so we're looking for people who sort of embody those characteristics in how they approach the world and how they look to create luck as they're building their businesses.
Chip, is it also, do you have to have this certain mindset? And don't laugh at me and mock me when I say this, but if Brian Wojciechowski came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to partner with me and put up money so I could get like a bed in someone's house?"
Right.
I would be like, "No, that's the nuttiest things I've ever heard in my life." Or same thing with Uber, right? "Okay, Jack, do you want to invest with me? You're going to get into a stranger's car. You have no idea who this person is. And it's like a, Toyota that's 30 years old and it's all broken down, and I'm going to go in there." Okay. How is there something in the psyche? Really, now I'm really like serious shit. Like, is there something embedded the way you think as a VC founder that, like, I'm looking at all what could go wrong, where they look at everything that could go right?
Yeah,
Is that something? Is that
100%. And this is something that, quite frankly, I've sort of learned over my career.
yeah.
When I started my career, I would say I was on the margin more analytical.
Mhm.
And you can analyze your way out of any venture capital investment. There's always 100 reasons that something will not go right. And the key to success as a venture capitalist is to, yes, pay attention to those 100 reasons that something can go wrong, but also be this sort of optimistic skeptic, and really be able to dream alongside the founders and imagine a world where indeed people will rent out rooms on Airbnb or drive Ubers, that you can sort of come together with a founder and you can see that worldview and you can dream the big dream in terms of what something can become. And so that combination of skepticism married with optimism and a willingness and an ability to sort of think about how the world changes over the course of the next 10 years. If you can marry those two, that's what you need to see in an early stage venture capitalist. Because if you're just wildly optimistic all the time, you'll invest in anything, because great founders are great storytellers, and you'll get excited about everything, and not everything can be great. But on the other hand, if you're always too skeptical, you'll make no investments, and you'll turn down too many great opportunities. So there's this balancing act you're trying to play in your mind, and that's why most and many venture firms are sort of structured as partnerships, is that you try to surround that investment decision as a partnership with people who, I have one partner who's a wild optimist, and he can imagine how any company that we see can be great. And so he's a great
Yeah.
counterbalance to me, because I maybe come at things maybe a little bit more skeptically. And then, we were in a meeting yesterday where the roles were reversed. I was the wild optimist and he was the skeptic. And so you play off each other as partnerships, and in partnerships, and that's how you hopefully collectively make better decisions.
Is it also part of the way it works is a numbers game? Is that you have to seed a lot of companies and that you hope that a few of them are going to really work and realize that a lot won't? Is that
Yeah,
part of it?
yeah, 100%. And so
Yeah.
you'll hear venture capitalists refer to something called the power law, which is a very small number of investments, drive a significant amount of the returns. And so, I'm on the board of a company called MongoDB, which I've been on the board of for 15 years. It was 5 people and an idea when we invested, at 67 cents a share. Today, it's a public company with 5,000 people and nearly 2 billion in revenue and $250 a share. And so it's those kind of companies that are transformative in terms of the impact you can have as an investor in terms of driving returns for our investors. But also, that's the fun part. When you're able to start with something that's small and play a role in helping that become something that obviously is big and enduring is what we're trying to do. But it is, you make 100 investments. If you have a couple of those, that's a great hit rate. You just need to make sure they really do work.
Chip, how does it feel when you invested 67 cents and then it goes to wherever you mentioned it to like 5,000 employees? Does that just blow your mind? That has to be an amazing feeling.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. I mean, look, the other aspect of being a venture capitalist is you sort of recognize that we have an impact, but we're not the people making it happen every day. When I first started my career at Greylock, one of the senior partners had an expression: "We're the invited guests. We're there to support entrepreneurs. We're there to help them realize their dreams. And if we can do that by being an effective sounding board on
Mhm.
strategy, we can be an effective sounding board on product strategy and go-to-market plans, and sharing experiences that we've seen from other companies and helping them think about organizational development and how things can change. We can have an impact, and that's what we try to do as board members. But day in and day out, it's the founders, it's the executives, it's the leaders of the company that are really the ones that are making it happen. And oftentimes our job is to not screw it up, and engage deeply on a small number of very important issues where you have those difficult 55-45 decisions that are a fork in the road, and you try to make sure you take the right fork through an intensity of focus and effort on those really important decisions.
I mean, in terms of that importance of your role as being a sounding board, how did you get into that level of intuition, that level of experience, right? Because you've been a VC since 1994 at least, right? When you joined Greylock. What came before? How did you get into venture capital? How did you make that switch and say, you know what, I actually have a lot to offer to this next generation of entrepreneurs, these founders, as a capital allocator?
Yeah, no, so quick background is I grew up in a small town outside of Boston, went to public schools, ended up deciding to small town, how far away could I go? I went to Stanford as an undergrad, so pretty far away, but also
Right.
right in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so you sort of, there is something in the water in Silicon Valley where you have this entrepreneurial spirit and bug and sense of an ability to make anything happen in the world that you want. After that, I worked in San Francisco for a couple of years at Bain& Company, which was a large management consulting firm. I had a chance to sort of get sort of your broad-based business education, if you will. I then left Bain to go to Eastern Europe. So this is right when the wall was coming down in Eastern Europe. I worked for a year and a half in Poland on privatization, and we were trying to privatize state-owned enterprises. But what you really saw in Poland was that the growth and the energy was coming from the entrepreneurial sector. It wasn't trying to privatize a 50-year-old behind the times machine tools company. It was the entrepreneurial energy that you saw in the community that really drove the success, not just across Poland, but also all of Eastern Europe. And so that was sort of an interesting insight. And then I came back to Boston for business school. And when I was coming out of business school, it was right as the internet was kicking off. So I graduated in '94. Netscape, as a sort of seminal moment in the internet era, was released in '94. And I had the sense that there was just huge opportunities where technology could really transform the way we work, the way we socialize, the way we conduct ourselves, both professionally and personally. And so the chance to sort of invest and be part of that was something I was sort of eager to be part of. And I had a chance at Greylock. It was a 29-year-old firm when I joined. They hadn't hired anyone in 10 years, and there were 6 partners and me. And so I got to learn the venture capital business from the best in the business. And I spent time with each of the 6 partners and started learning, a little bit about how they each approach the business. They each approached it quite differently. And so trying to combine that into my own point of view on how did I want to operate and how did I want to show up as a VC was sort of my career path. As I think about what sort of positioned me to be a good source of advice and guidance for young companies, obviously over time, a lot of it's experience and having seen patterns and all that. But I would say first and foremost, I'm a particularly good listener, and I think that's probably an underrated skill with venture capitalists, many of whom like to hear themselves talk. And of course, I'm on a podcast doing nothing but talking. But
Right.
but I listen well, and it's trying to listen for the nuances of what someone's really trying to say. But also, when you listen well, you can connect dots from something someone said an hour ago to something they just said to something they said a month ago, and you sort of put them together and say, hey, what I think I hear you saying is X, and how do we think about this question? And so if you listen well and then ask good questions, part of what we're trying to unlock for our founders is they're incredibly smart and they're incredibly driven, and they're deeply connected to their own businesses. But by sort of pulling the lens back and listening and asking those questions, you can help them. Oftentimes they get to the answer that they perhaps would have, but you're trying to help them get to that answer more quickly in a faster time, because that's how startups win. Startups win on speed. They have nothing else. They have no brand, they have no product, but they have an ability to execute and execute really quickly. And if we can help unlock that in our founders, we're doing them a favor.
It's so interesting. So how does it work behind the scenes when, let's say, Rick and I have this startup? Do we then depend upon the more senior venture capitalists to guide us along the way, or are the startups just on their own?
Yeah, there's sort of this sweet spot that we like to find in our relationship with our founders. If I back Jack and Rick's new co, and you turn to me and be like, hey, what should I do? Something's gone horribly wrong, because I will not have the right answers. And on the other hand, at the other end of the spectrum, you're like, I got it. We know exactly what we need to do. Get out of the way. I never want to talk to you again. That's probably not great either. And so you're trying to find this position of trust where you can be a sounding board, you can be a source of advice and guidance. But the founder's job is to incorporate all the advice and guidance they get from their board members and their advisors and other investors and their team members and what they're hearing in the market. And they sort of put that together into, here's my point of view, here's the decision I'm making. And then they tend to hold those decisions loosely. So you make it, you run at it, you listen to the data. If it turns out it was wrong, you fix it and you move forward. And that's that speed that I talked about with founders. It's sort of being decisive, but also being iterative in how you're approaching the world, and doing so rapidly is what allows you to really move forward very quickly.
I mean, when you see a startup, right? You've been investing in AI, machine learning, this like hard tech infrastructure since 2002 at least. It can, I imagine it can get very easy to kind of get caught up in this kind of sci-fi almost vision of the future. You've always called yourself kind of a pragmatist in terms of how you focus your investing. How do you tell the difference between what is, sounds too good to be true versus, oh, actually I can kind of see um, what it could become?
Yeah, it's interesting. We first started investing in sort of AI related companies a dozen years ago, and to a certain extent, that might have been too early. We tended to recognize that markets tend to develop sort of from the bottoms up, and so if you're going to build a AI system or a machine learning based system, it starts with data, and so that was part of the hypothesis of investing in MongoDB as a big database company. Like, you needed core infrastructure and technologies that enable people to collect and manage and store and analyze data. So you sort of had a point of view on how a market's going to develop. We then sort of moved up the stack in terms of thinking about tools to help people analyze and run models and the like. And then, as the technology matures, suddenly that opens up layers of opportunity at the application layer, which is where we're spending a lot of time and energy today. And so you try to sort of think about patterns of how markets develop, how technologies develop, and apply that to a new latest and greatest, if you will. And that mostly is I think a function of just sort of being a student of history from a technology perspective, and understanding prior sort of big platform shifts, having invested through the first wave of the internet. I saw how that market developed, having invested through the first wave of the cloud computing era, sort of saw how that market developed. So you take some patterns from history, and then you marry that with a unique point of view, and then join that, on the side with just deep insights that you get from founders and academics, and trying to understand what the state of the art is at any point in time, and therefore what's possible to be built and created, and trying to always, be somewhat ahead of the curve. Obviously, the best ideas are sort of, a little bit early, but if you're too early, you might as well be wrong. And so it's trying to find that balancing act.
Chip, can I ask you a kind of a little bit of a tangent? So on Blind, on the platform, about 10 million technologists, primarily a whole lot of software engineers, software developers. And you would think statistically, with so many people, that they would say, hey, you know what? I work for Meta, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, what have you. Let's just go and do our own thing. But Rick, right? You don't really see that much. I would have thought I would see that, I don't want to say quite often, but see enough of them doing that, but they don't. Is there a thing in your world, is that if you get too comfortable and your total comp is very handsome, that it's easy just to keep doing it, as opposed to then say, you know what, I'm gonna risk it and now do the startup on my own.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you're in a, if you're in a big tech role and you're well
Mhm.
compensated, um, this goes to my earlier comment on burning passion. You have to have a burning passion to go pursue something, because you are foregoing, a high quality job, an intellectually stimulating job, and a lot of pay, and so that, you know that not everyone is ready to do that, is certainly one observation. And I think the second is sometimes you can be pretty far removed from the market and from the problems in larger companies, and so that passion comes from seeing a problem and
Mhm.
identifying a problem and saying, "Oh, I know exactly how I would try to solve that." And sometimes you can be relatively narrowly focused in a larger company and maybe not have the ability to see that. And so the transition from a very large tech company to a pure startup, one person and an idea, is very difficult. And oftentimes you see sort of two steps. It's either you ended up at that big company because you'd previously been at a startup, or you maybe leave that big company and go to something smaller and see what it's like to be in a smaller environment with a much broader scope, and then from there start something. And I happen to have two children who've both worked at Google, and so I know what you speak of. They both left after 2 years because they felt like they didn't want to get too comfortable,
Interesting.
and now they are off pursuing other initiatives, and who knows, maybe I'll have the chance to invest in them someday.
Interesting. So what do they do? So are they starting up their own companies or doing it
No,
together?
my oldest went from Google to a startup or mid-stage company, and then she actually went to business school and is now a venture capitalist. And my second went from Google to a sort of 100-person tech company that's now, several times larger. And so they both have found their ways, but
Hmm.
there's lots of different paths. Obviously, is one of the key insights.
I mean, I want to pull on that thread in terms of transitions. You've obviously seen such a diverse range of kind of founder profiles and senior level folks, operators in the industry. Do you see any familiar patterns in terms of when they decided to transition functions or industries or roles within a company? What does that decision look like?
Yeah, we've looked at this and tried to identify what is the down the middle, founder profile, if you will.
Right.
And as we look across our portfolio and we look across their success stories, it really is all over the map. There's certainly a cohort of founders that we backed who are building their second company. You love that. They know what it's like. There's actually the bar to overcome to start your second company, because how hard it
Mhm.
is quite high, and so you're jumping right back into the fire, and if you're willing to do that, you clearly have that passion and drive for the idea you're pursuing. And so second time founders, they tend to know their way around the block. They tend to have understood the mistakes they've made, and they can learn from that. And so there is a bias towards repeat founders, but obviously you can't just back repeat founders because there's only there's a limited pool. In the first time founders, we've backed teams right out of academia. We've backed teams that are coming from sort of mid-sized tech companies. We've backed teams that are coming from failed startups. We've got the whole nine yards in terms of the background, and a lot of it is what I was referring to earlier of really understanding what makes somebody tick, and what their drive is, and what gives them passion for the idea they're pursuing.
Chip, I wonder, do you need, or generally for VCs, to have kind of this mental health thing? Because I got to imagine if you're working on what you're working on, and then you see some knucklehead who all of a sudden stumbles into this billion-dollar unicorn company, and you're like, what the hell? How did that happen? I don't get it. This guy's an idiot. And how did he do that? Or you missed, you were pitched some idea and you're like, this is crazy. A robo car, no one driving it. I don't want to do that. And then boom, it, goes up. You know, is there a lot of that goes on behind the scenes where you're like, I can't believe I missed that, and it just eats at you. And the other times you should catch it and you're like, oh my God, this is great. I can't believe it. Everything came together.
Yeah, no, this is for on the venture capital side.
Yeah.
The errors of omission are the ones that really knot you, for sure.
Wait, I mean that you didn't do it. You didn't
Yeah,
you didn't.
you saw some great company, or you saw some company at the
Yeah.
exact right time that sort of fit with your expertise. You had an opportunity to invest, and you didn't, and then it goes on to greatness. Because of the power law issue, where there are only so many great companies that are created in a given year, when you miss them, you lose a lot of sleep over those for sure.
Can you
And
ever shake it off or no? It's always gonna like linger a little bit and
oh,
just
I can name them all.
yeah. Okay.
So you always remember that. And what you try to do obviously understand what did I miss? What are my
Mhm.
patterns? Do I have biases in my thinking? Do I have blind spots in my approach? And when I referred earlier that maybe I started my career maybe more analytical, and I needed to marry that with more optimism, I would say my recurring theme earlier in my career was looking at things maybe a little bit too analytically, and I would analyze my way out of some good decisions. Um, and so you need to take those moments to reflect and introspect on how you get better and how you improve and what you need to change. And so that's an important part of sort of continuing to develop. And the fun part about the venture capital industry is, and it's why I've been doing it for 30 years, is that every day is different. Like this is not a boring job. There's always a new founder who's going to come in and express a vision for the world that gets you super exciting. There's always a new technical trend to learn about and stay up to date on, and there's always a new problem at a company. You'd think, having served on, probably close to 100 boards at this point in time, that I'd be well versed in all the potential problems, but there's always a new one.
Mhm.
And so that's what keeps it interesting. But that's what also keeps you learning and keeps you, continuing to sort of advance your own thinking, your own mental models to apply to the next new situation.
Can I pick on you a little bit and dig into it? Are there one or two names that stand out in particular that might be a part of your kind of anti portfolio?
Oh, sure. As I said, I remember them all.
No.
The
Yeah.
So one that sticks out in the Boston area is a company called HubSpot, which most people have probably heard
Okay.
about. So I met Brian Halligan. I actually knew him when he was at PTC, and he goes back to MIT to get an MBA, and I met him right in his end of his second year, and he was talking about, I'm trying to build this thing to help people build websites, and that sounded exquisitely boring. And what I failed to see there is that Brian is just a complete uh, winner as a guy to drive a company forward. I had not met his co-founder Dharmesh, who's very talented technically. So I missed just how good a team they were. And what good teams do is that they take that initial idea and they bend it 30 degrees to the right or the left, and they bent that initial idea 30 degrees to the right or left, and suddenly it became something that was quite interesting. But by then, we had passed on the investment opportunity and missed it. And so that's one example.
I mean, it seems like part of the skill required to be a venture capitalist is you're hearing all these pitches, and maybe some of them are bummers, right? How do you think about going beyond how the company was pitched and what it could become, right? That seems to be kind of the moral of the story from the HubSpot
Yeah, I think
anecdote you just shared.
it's a great question. And so, our job, if we receive 100 pitches, we'll say yes to, call it one of them. That's not
Wow.
entirely accurate statistically, but you say no a lot in our job. And so you probably can't necessarily try to dream on every company. But what I try to do with every company that we meet is end the discussion with a comment that's something like, I'd love to hear your bigger vision. How do you think about how this changes over the course of the next 10 years? Help me dream alongside you. And so a set of questions along those lines help me sort of tease out from the founders how they're thinking about the world. And to the extent they're like, well, I'm doing this, and then I could see that leading to, something that's somewhat related, and that could lead to something different. You can see, a really sort of thoughtful strategy to, climb the first part of the mountain and then climb the next part of the mountain and then climb to the top of the mountain. And so I like to give founders the space to sort of lean back and talk about how they view the world developing, how they see their vision developing. And the ones who've put thought into that, I think, you're like, wait, I want to spend some more time with them. There may be it may be that their second act actually really should be their first act, or it may be that you really like the sequence and you hadn't thought about the second and third and fourth steps of that sequence. And so what I've learned over the years is that trying to give myself the space and the founders the space to sort of talk about that big vision is critically important to unlock that. Is there more potential or not?
I don't know if you feel comfortable saying this, but are there any ideas that you would say like, oh my gosh, here's some really good ideas for, somebody who wants to start it. I'm not interested in myself in doing this, but like, hey, these are, or just themes, like certain areas that, hey, if you're really passionate about this, I think this is fertile ground, go with it.
Yeah, I think one of the things you learn as a venture capitalist, when I talked about sort of being too removed from the problem space, we
Mhm.
we are generally one step removed from the problem space. And so my ability to identify a specific opportunity is probably, quite frankly, somewhat limited. And
Hmm.
and so at any point in time, I may have great ideas, but I will be, to a certain extent, borrowing from the last 10 ideas I heard from amazing founders. So I'm not sure I'll be the best insight. There are, that said, some sort of big themes that we're excited about. And so we do try to think thematically, like, again, where do we think the world's going? And so if you think about the AI world, obviously the huge transformation post ChatGPT in November 22, suddenly it unlocked this art of the possible of what generative AI could do. And to date, a lot of the early success has accrued, at what we consider to be sort of the core foundational layer. So the compute infrastructure, companies like NVIDIA, the foundational models, the open AIs, the Anthropics of the world. And there's an inordinate amount of money that's flowing into that base layer. And and from an investment perspective, we look at that capital and say that's going to be used to advance the state of the art extremely rapidly over the course of the next few years. And you saw this in the early days of the internet, where a lot of capital flowed into the core infrastructure, building out the network layer, building out the server infrastructure. And that's what enabled people to build enduring application companies on top of all that advances. And so, when you look back on the internet and you say, what are the big companies? It's the Googles and the Amazons of the world that built on top of that infrastructure. And so we're looking for companies that are trying to build innovative end user experiences on top of all the AI infrastructure that's being built. And so that could be someone rethinking a business to business use case, and how do I, fundamentally transform how jobs are done within enterprises, deploy AI agents that can actually do work as opposed to just like managing workflows. And so we're really excited about the role that AI can play to sort of transform the B2B application environment. So that's a big theme we're excited about. And then similarly, what we call sort of AI native applications, where people are just, to use your Uber example from earlier,
Mhm.
reason Uber could exist because suddenly everybody was walking around with a GPS chipset in their pocket. Uh, Before that, it couldn't exist. Well, now everyone can walk around with an AI thing in their pocket or an AI thing in their cloud. And so what are those new end user experiences, consumer experiences that are created? And so we're really keen on founders who are sort of thinking really differently about this huge new technology enabler and what that's going to allow them to create based on their understanding of the market and sort of problems that exist in the world.
No, I appreciate that insight, right? Because I think right now there's just so much hype and interest in AI, right? Obviously driven by ChatGPT, but it seems to be more focused on, oh, well, I have to get involved with NVIDIA somehow, or it's just these big players. As you're identifying these kind of like secondary, these more closer to the consumer layers, are there other things that maybe folks should think about in terms of professionals that are looking to get into the industry? Kind of what signals do you see, besides the the passionate founders and the grit that they demonstrate, that maybe a professional should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, and I would suspect a lot of people who are listening are also thinking about, hey, maybe I need to join one of these companies. And so
Right.
so part of the
Mm.
lens that we can provide is sort of, how does an average venture capitalist sort of think about the world? And so obviously, if you're thinking about joining or starting, obviously a lot of those founder characteristics that I talked about are super important, and you'd want to see that in yourself as a founder or in the founder of the company you're thinking of joining. We spent a lot of time from an investment perspective thinking about a few issues that are very AI specific. And so the hardest part in today's world is sort of what's the source of competitive advantage. There's a lot of companies we see that are taking advantage of all the infrastructure that I talked about, but they aren't necessarily advancing the state of the art. And so it's quote unquote a thin wrapper on an open AI or some AI system, or they have an existing product and they've put a little co-piloted into it to make the end user experience a little bit better. Those are unlikely to be sustainably differentiated in the long run, as the skills required to build those kind of applications become more easily accessible. Anybody can build those, and so we're looking for things that are on the margin sort of harder to build. We're looking for things where people have really been sort of deeply thoughtful about how the AI interacts with humans, and so this human AI interface it is on one level somewhat of a nebulous concept, but there's an aspect of trust and engagement and delegation, and how do you build an application that understands that this AI is to a certain extent going to be sort of thought of as a coworker. And so how do I trust my coworkers? How do I delegate work to my coworkers? How do I double check that they're accurate? And so people are really thoughtful about sort of the nature of the interface between the AI that's doing things on my behalf and me, becomes really important. And that's still a pretty sort of nascent area where I think the really smart founders are thinking very creatively about how they build trust and drive engagement and increase the ability to delegate tasks to AI systems. And then data plays a huge part as the other big source of differentiation. And so, do you have proprietary data that allows you to have AI systems that are able to perform in a way that are better than the generic off-the-shelf models? How does your system generate more data that you can then use to make it even better? And so thinking about data moats and what are the data network effects is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So those are the sort of somewhat non-obvious areas that we think about as we're looking at new investment opportunities, and if I was looking to join a company, I'd be thinking about as well.
I mean, as an investor, as a board member to a lot of these companies in this space, are you seeing certain trends in terms of profiles where they're looking to hire where they can't get enough of the role? Are they primarily looking for these machine learning engineers, these data engineers, these data scientists, or is it something beyond these kind of top three names that we all think about?
Yeah, there's certainly probably unlimited demand for those roles,
Okay.
for sure.
Mm.
The
Right.
uh, One of the things we see across a lot of our application layer companies is that they're seeing great success in taking people who would be your classic, very smart, quote unquote, full stack software engineer or back end engineer, and and putting them into a role that's sort of applied AI engineer. So it's how do you leverage all these technologies uh, that are now available or in the open source community, and sort of put them together in a way to create a compelling application, compelling end user experience. And really great software engineers are able to come up to speed on that. And yes, there's a slightly different way of thinking. AI systems are completely non-deterministic, and so you have to build a bunch of guardrails and evaluation frameworks and other things into your system. But a really good systems thinker, a really good software engineer, can make the transition into becoming a really good applied AI engineer. And so that's certainly an interesting opportunity. And then all the other aspects of company building are incredibly important. It may be even more so in the AI as the core technologies become more mature. The advantage is going to be the companies that are really smart about marketing, really smart about go-to-market, distribution strategies, and the opportunity, I think, for people in that realm is not how do I, be really smart about my go-to-market motion, but also how do I infuse AI to make my go-to-market motion more efficient, to make it better. And so we're also drawn to companies that are not only necessarily building AI, but leveraging AI to build a more efficient company on sort of every dimension. And the practitioners in the sales world, the practitioners in the marketing world, the practitioners in the customer success world that sort of are up to date on what's the art of the possible to leverage the latest and greatest technologies to be better at their job and more efficient at their job is I think they'll have a leg up out there in the market.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, I'm speaking to an elder statesman of investing, of venture capital, of AI, of this technology. Are there questions that I should have asked you that, our audience should know about, should benefit from?
One of the funny stories that happened to me recently, I gave a talk on AI to a few hundred people, sort of a generalist audience, if you will. And
Right.
and at the end, one of my friends came up and he said, "Chip, it was interesting. You talked about all these industries that are going to be disrupted, and you didn't talk about your own industry."
Yeah, lucky you, right?
That's right. So we're all unique, snowflakes. Like everyone else, there's an opportunity for disruption, but not the venture capital industry. And so we're spending a lot of time thinking in the AI world about how do we use it to make ourselves better, and how do we support our portfolio companies better? How do we use it to make better investment decisions? How do we use it to identify founders that we don't know that we should know? And so part of being a founder of a venture capital firm, yes, I'm an investor, but I also need to think about our business as a business and how do we make changes to the way we operate so we can continue to be relevant and an important player in the industry going forward.
So smart. That's funny. I really appreciate this walkthrough in terms of what we can learn from your experience as a venture capitalist, because you don't have to be a VC, you don't have to be an investor to really benefit in terms of this practical knowledge. So thanks for coming on the show, Chip.
Super nice
Thank
to
you.
spend time with all of you, and thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, Chip. This was great. This is really informative. I think for the audience, they're not aware. I think a lot of them aren't aware of it. So this is really some really good stuff for them to say, hey, wait, maybe I could get into the VC area, or maybe, I'm going to make some investments. So I think this is awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.